Everything begins when, almost without a voice, she leans over the table of a single dad and whispers, "I can't afford this dinner." It wasn't blackmail, it wasn't drama. It was the raw despair of someone who has tried to be strong for far too long. What she didn't imagine was that this man carried a shattered past, a daughter she had already saved without knowing it, and a decision that would change not only that night, but the fate of everyone there. In this story, you will see how far a sister is willing to go so she doesn't lose the one she loves, the cruel price of injustice, and what happens when someone chooses to be a shelter in another person's life. If you have ever felt alone, even while doing everything right, stay with me until the end. This story may not change the world, but it may change the way you look at the invisible waitresses around you. She held the order pad as if it were a lifeline, but her fingers were trembling so much that the pen felt far too heavy. The warm light of the restaurant couldn't hide the exhaustion on her face, nor the way she swallowed hard before speaking, like someone trying to hold a sob in her throat so she wouldn't fall apart in the middle of the dining room. And even so, no one there seemed to notice. Or maybe they did and chose to pretend they didn't see, because it was more comfortable to keep eating, laughing, toasting, than to face the pain of someone who was serving the table. It was only when she stopped beside the single dad's table, lowered her voice, and let it slip out like a dangerous secret. "I can't afford this dinner." That time seemed to slow down. She wasn't begging. She wasn't trying to put on a show. It came out in the most humiliating way possible, low, small, almost an apology for existing. And in that same instant she regretted it, because her face burned, because shame is a kind of fire that no water can put out. The man slowly lifted his eyes. He was in his early 30s, with stubble on his face and the look of someone who had already learned not to be shocked by life, but still cared. Beside him, a little girl of about 6, in a simple dress and her hair tied back, played with the folded napkin as if it were a toy, unaware of the weight of that moment. The child had the look of someone who had seen too much for her age, and yet carried a stubborn innocence. The waitress, the badge said Helena, kept the professional smile for one more second, as if it were a mask glued to her face. But her eyes betrayed her. Her eyes were crying out for help. The man didn't ask why. He didn't use that easy phrase customers say when they want to seem kind. "Oh, it's fine, don't worry." He simply pushed his plate aside, as if telling the world that, at that table, now, the food was the least important thing. "How long have you been working here?" he asked in a calm tone, almost intimate, as if they were speaking far away from everyone else. Helena blinked, confused. Her hands closed around the pad. 3 months, sir." He looked at the child. The girl looked at Helena and gave her a sweet smile that hurt. "My name is Miguel," he said, turning his gaze back to her. "And this is Laura." Helena tried to answer, but her voice failed. "Hi, I'm Helena." Miguel nodded, as if he already knew. "Helena, I'm going to do something now," he went on, and there was something definite in the way he chose his words. "And you might find it strange, but I need you to trust me for a minute." She swallowed hard, because trust was something life had ripped from her so violently that now it felt like a luxury. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, with the fear of someone who has already learned that every favor comes with a price. Miguel didn't smile. He just took out his wallet, pulled out a card, and set it on the table, without showing off. "I want you to sit down," he said. Helena's eyes widened. "I can't. I'm on my shift." "I know," he replied. "But sit down for 2 minutes. If someone complains, I'll take responsibility." It was absurd. A waitress sitting with a customer? In a place like that, where the manager was always watching for any mistake, so he could humiliate them in front of everyone. Her stomach churned. "Sir, I'm going to get fired." Miguel leaned in a little. His tone dropped even lower. "You're going to get fired anyway if you keep going like this." Helena froze, because he said it the way someone speaks when they're not accusing, but noticing, like someone who knows how to recognize when a person is walking around broken on the inside, barely held together out of sheer stubbornness. She looked around the dining room. She heard laughter, silverware, music in the background. She smelled meat, wine, expensive perfume, and behind all of that, the smell of her own fear, the cold sweat that appears when you realize there's nowhere left to run. So she slowly pulled out the chair beside him, as if she were committing a crime. She sat, and in that moment, without understanding it yet, her life began to change course. Miguel didn't ask about the dinner. He didn't ask how much she owed. He didn't ask if she was disorganized. He just put his phone on the table, opened a picture, and turned it toward her. It was a picture of a little boy, younger than Lara, in a hospital, hooked up to wires, his face pale. "This is my son, Tomas," Miguel said, and his voice carried an old weight. "He died 2 years ago." Helena instinctively brought her hand to her mouth. Shock tightened her chest. Lara, beside him, kept playing with the napkin, but her smile faded a little, as if that absence were a normal part of her routine. "My wife died before that," Miguel added, "and I found out that life doesn't warn you when it's going to pull the ground from under your feet. It just does, and you either learn to breathe without air, or you give up." Helena tried to speak, but no words came out. Miguel took a deep breath. "I came here today because I heard something at Lara's school playground." Helena frowned. "At the playground?" He nodded. "Two mothers talking. One of them said that the waitress from the downtown restaurant was desperate because she needed a husband by tomorrow." Helena felt the blood drain from her face. The world grew distant. She would have stood up, run to the kitchen, disappeared forever if her legs had obeyed. But they didn't, because that was the most shameful truth she had. And suddenly, it was in strangers' mouths. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied on instinct. Miguel didn't push. He just looked at her with a calm that hurt, because there was no judgment in it. "I didn't come here to expose you, Helena," he said. "I came because I know what it's like when you're about to lose everything." She let out a weak, humorless laugh. "You don't know. You have a family. You have a daughter. You have a life." Miguel pointed to the almost untouched plate. "This life here," he said, "is not what you imagine." Helena looked at Lara. The girl had small bruises on her knees, like any child who falls and gets back up without drama. And in her eyes there was a stubborn hope, as if she still believed that adults could fix the world. Helena felt a lump in her throat, and, before she knew it, she was speaking without restraint. Maybe because when someone truly listens to you, you start to exist again. "I need a husband by tomorrow," she confessed, her voice barely more than a threat. "Because if I don't take someone with me, I'll lose my sister." Miguel's brow furrowed slightly. "Your sister?" Helena lowered her eyes. Her chest rose and fell quickly. "My father died a year ago," she said. "My mother disappeared when I was a child. I stayed with my sister, Julia. She's 15. I do everything for her. Everything. But I'm alone." She drew in a breath, and the words began to come with the bitter taste of memory. "When my father died, I thought I could handle it. I worked 2 jobs. I studied. I tried to be mother and sister at the same time. We live in a one-bedroom place. Some days we run out of gas. Some days we run out of food. But I managed somehow." Her eyes filled with tears, until the social worker showed up. Miguel stayed silent. "She said Julia needed stability," Helena went on. "That I'm too young, that I don't have structure, that I work too much and I'm out all the time. And that a teenage girl can't spend so many hours alone." Helena squeezed the pad hard. "I tried to explain. I tried to prove it. I showed paid bills. I showed that she's doing well at school. I showed that I do everything I can. But she looked at me like I was the problem." For a second, her shame turned into rage. She said that if I didn't present a more stable family structure, with a male figure and a suitable environment, she would recommend that Julia be placed in a temporary shelter until they decided what to do. Miguel rubbed his chin, thoughtful, and Helena realized something. His pain wasn't just empathy. It was recognition, as if he had heard different versions of this same injustice before. "And tomorrow," Helena whispered, "is the final visit. She's coming to our place. She'll evaluate everything. And someone told me that if I showed up with a husband, if it looked like I had a family, that it could change her decision." Miguel ran his fingers along the rim of the glass. "Who told you that?" Helena gave a short, sad laugh. "A lawyer I can't afford. He said it like he was doing me a favor, but I saw the way he looked at me, as if I had to pay in another way." Miguel's expression hardened for a moment. Helena kept going, stumbling over her own words. "So I thought of anything. Of asking a friend to pretend. But I don't have friends. I thought of paying someone. But I don't have money. I thought of lying. But lies don't last, right?" She closed her eyes, and a tear fell quickly. She wiped it away with the back of her hand, furious at her own weakness. "And today," she confessed, "I brought my sister here. Because I wanted her to eat something good at least once. She's at the table in the back, hidden, because I can't leave her alone at home. I ordered a cheap dish. I was going to pay in installments. I was going to find a way. Helena looked at Miguel's plate. But the manager saw, she said, her voice turning to ice. He said I was stealing from the restaurant. He said I was dirtying the image of the place with people like me. He said that either I paid everything today, or he'd call the police and fire me too. She struggled to breathe. I had no way to pay. And then, I saw you. I saw your daughter. And I thought, maybe I could be human for a second and tell the truth before losing everything. The silence at the table was heavy, but not cruel. It was the kind of silence that holds someone's pain with respect. Miguel leaned back in his chair. He looked at Laura, who was now watching Helena seriously. You know what my father used to say? Miguel asked suddenly, as if pulling a sentence from some old place. He used to say that a person's dignity cannot depend on how much money they have in their pocket. But the world insists on making it depend. Helena shook her head, incredulous, because that sounded too beautiful to be real life. Miguel picked up the card and slid it closer to her. I'll pay for the dinner, he said firmly. Yours and your sister's. Helena opened her mouth to refuse, out of pride, out of fear, out of everything. But he raised his hand. This is not charity. It's not a handout. It's justice. She choked on the tears she was trying to hold back. But I'll pay you back. Miguel nodded. One day you will. To someone. In whatever way you can. Helena took a deep breath. That alone would have been a miracle. But then he looked at her, and the next sentence hit like a stone through glass. And about tomorrow. I can go with you. Helena froze. What? Miguel didn't look away. I can be the husband, he said simply, as if offering an umbrella. Helena's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her ears. No, she said quickly. No, that's crazy. You don't even know me. I know enough, he replied. I know you work until you shake. I know you brought your sister here to eat. I know you didn't ask for this to get anything out of me. You asked because you were out of options. Helena shook her head desperately. This could turn into a problem. What if they find out? What if the social worker notices? What if this makes everything worse? Miguel tilted his head slightly, and there was a sadness in his eyes. Helena, sometimes life is already bad enough. And still, you keep trying to do things the right way. I don't know if you believe in God, in fate, in coincidence, but I believe in one thing. When we can stop an injustice and choose not to, we become part of it. Helena was speechless. I'm not asking anything in return, Miguel continued. I just want to help. Because one day, someone helped Laura, and I never really got to thank them. Helena looked at the girl. What do you mean? Miguel exhaled slowly. On the night Tomas died, he said, his throat tightening. I was at the hospital. I went out for 5 minutes, just 5, to get some water. And Laura, still a baby, was in my wife's arms. My wife fainted from exhaustion. Laura fell from her arms and hit her head on the floor. Helena pressed a hand to her chest. I came back and saw blood, Miguel went on. I screamed. I didn't know what to do. And a nurse appeared running. A young woman, in a simple uniform. She grabbed my daughter, stopped the bleeding, called the doctor, did everything with a calm I will never forget. She saved Lara's life that day. Helena held her breath. Goosebumps ran up her arms. That nurse, Miguel concluded, had a name on her badge. Helena. The world shrank. Helena blinked, as if she were trying to see something impossible. No, it can't be. Miguel nodded, and his eyes shone. I looked for you afterward, he said. I went back to the hospital. I asked about you. They said you had left, that you'd dropped out of college, that you'd gone away. Helena brought her hands to her face. The memory came back whole and cruel. The cold hospital, the sleepless nights, the university abandoned because life hadn't waited for her to graduate. That was me, she whispered, her voice breaking. I worked as a nursing aide for a while. I was paying for college. But when my father got sick, I had to quit. Miguel closed his eyes for a second, like someone finally fitting a missing piece into place. So that's it, he said. Life knocked you down and brought you here. And now I can do for you what you did for my daughter. Helena cried silently, with her head bowed, because there was no way to pretend to be strong anymore. Laura stretched out her small hand and gently touched Helena's wrist. Are you sad? The little girl asked. Helena tried to smile, tears streaming down her face. Tired, she confessed. Lara pouted. My dad says that when we're tired, we need someone to hold our hand. And without asking permission, she took Helena's hand. It was a simple gesture. Childish. But Helena felt as if someone had tied a piece of her soul back into place. Miguel stood up. Let's go, he said. You're going to take me to your sister's table. And then we'll talk about tomorrow. Helena stood up as if walking inside a dream. The table in the back was darker, near the wall. Julia was there, hunched, shoulders tense, wearing a worn-out coat that was too big, probably her father's. When she saw Helena approaching with a man and a child, her eyes widened with the suspicion typical of a teenager who has learned not to get her hopes up. Hele, Julia whispered. What happened? Helena sat beside her, not caring about rules. Julia, she said, trying to breathe, this is Miguel. And this is Lara. Julia looked at Miguel as if she were assessing danger. Miguel didn't try to be charming. He just spoke with respect. I know this is strange, he said, but I came to help your sister. If you allow it. Julia pressed her lips together. Her eyes went to Helena, searching for the truth. Helena took her sister's hand. I told him everything, Helena admitted. And he wants to go with us tomorrow. Julia went pale. You've lost your mind. I know, Helena said, honestly exhausted. But I don't have any other way out. Julia started breathing fast, as if she wanted to scream but was holding herself back. Then, in a low, wounded tone, she asked, and what if it's a lie? Helena swallowed. It is a lie, she admitted. But it's a lie to stop them from taking you away from me. Julia stayed silent. Then she looked at Miguel, and there was a bitter maturity in her eyes. Do you know this could destroy her life? She asked. Miguel nodded. I do, he answered. That's why I won't do anything that could put your sister at risk. I'm just going to be there. I'll say as little as possible. I'll stand in as the presence the system demands to recognize what is already real. She's your family. Period. Julia looked at Lara. The girl smiled shyly. And for a second, the hardness in Julia's face softened. I hate this world, Julia murmured, more to herself than to them. Helena squeezed her hand tightly, as if to say, me too. That night, after her shift, Helena went out the back door of the restaurant, where the smell of garbage mixed with the light rain starting to fall. The manager walked past her and said, with venom disguised as humor, Careful, this isn't a shelter. Helena didn't answer, because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. Miguel was waiting outside, holding a large umbrella that covered him and Lara. When he saw Helena, he came closer and held the umbrella out to her without invading her space, as someone who offers without demanding. Do you live far? He asked. Helena hesitated. Not really. Miguel looked at the sky as the rain grew heavier. I'll drive you, he said. You and your sister. Helena wanted to say no. She wanted to refuse out of pride, fear, her need to control everything. But then she looked at Julia, shivering from the cold beside her, and remembered that pride doesn't protect anyone from the system. They went in Miguel's car. It wasn't a luxury car. It was clean, simple, with a child seat and some toys in the back. It smelled like soap and kids' snacks. It smelled like real life. On the way, Lara fell asleep with her head against the window. Julia stared out in silence, as if she were always prepared to be disappointed. And Helena watched the wet streets, feeling that something inside her was trying to believe again. When they reached the small building where Helena lived, Miguel looked at the worn facade and said nothing. He simply helped Julia carry a bag upstairs and waited in the narrow hallway, respecting their space, like someone who knows that poverty is humiliating enough without people staring too much. Inside the apartment, Helena felt ashamed of the peeling walls, the sink full of dishes, the old sofa. But Miguel didn't look with pity. He looked as if he saw effort. I'll be back early tomorrow, he said before leaving. What time is the visit? 10, Helena replied. Miguel nodded. I'll be here at 9. He was about to go when Helena called out suddenly, without thinking. Miguel. He stopped. Why are you really doing this? She asked, her voice trembling with the fear of being fooled. Miguel turned his head. The dim light in the hallway cast soft shadows on his tired expression. Because I know what it's like to lose someone and not be able to do anything, he said. And I'm not going to watch you lose your sister, if I can do something. Helena held her breath. Miguel added, almost in a whisper, as if it were a personal confession. And because I never forgot the way you held my daughter in that hospital. You held her as if she were yours. And now, maybe it's my turn to hold someone." He left, and Helena closed the door with trembling hands. That night, Helena didn't sleep. She sat on the sofa, staring at the dark living room, listening to Julia's breathing in the bedroom, feeling the weight of tomorrow like a ceiling about to collapse. She found herself thinking of her father, how he would still smile even when he was exhausted, and the phrase he repeated whenever life got too tight. "Daughter, we don't control the world, but we control the kind of person we keep being." And for the first time in months, Helena cried not just from fear. She cried from relief, from exhaustion, from hope. At 9 in the morning, Miguel was there. He wore a simple shirt, his hair still a bit damp, like someone who had showered in a hurry. Laura came along with a small backpack on her shoulders and a crumpled drawing in her hand. Helena opened the door and felt her heart race. Julia appeared behind her, arms crossed, but her eyes were red, as if she hadn't slept either. Miguel crouched down to Lara's height. "Remember what I told you?" he asked. Lara nodded. She walked up to Helena and handed her the drawing. It was a house, with 3 people holding hands and a huge sun above them. In the corner, written in crooked letters, was Helena. Helena brought her hand to her mouth again. Lara smiled. "It's so you don't forget," the girl said, "that a home isn't walls. It's people." Helena took a deep breath. That almost brought down the whole wall she'd built inside. When the social worker arrived at 10, she came with a clipboard and a trained look. People like her always seem overly polite, but it's a cold politeness, like someone who has already decided before they walk in. She observed the living room, wrote down what she saw, asked quick questions, and then looked at Miguel. "And you are?" Miguel extended his hand, firm but not exaggerated. "I'm Miguel, Helena's husband." Helena's stomach flipped when she heard that, even knowing it was for a reason. The social worker raised an eyebrow. "Husband?" she repeated, as if the word needed proof. Miguel kept his tone calm. "We've been together for some time," he said carefully. "But I work a lot, and so does Helena. Things got difficult after her father passed. We're organizing everything better now." The social worker looked at Julia. "And you, Julia, how do you feel here?" Julia drew in a breath, and for a moment Helena saw her sister struggle with the urge to tell the truth. The truth would be more correct. But in this world, truth doesn't always protect you. Julia looked at Helena. Then she looked at Miguel. And with the firm voice of someone who grew up too fast, she said, "I feel safe here." The social worker wrote that down. "Are you alone for long periods of time?" she asked. Miguel answered before Helena nearly drowned in her own anxiety. "We're adjusting that," he said. "I change my hours. And when I can't, Laura stays with my mother, and I ask her to pick Julia up from school. We're building a routine." The social worker stayed silent for a few seconds. She looked around. She watched their faces. And then she asked a question Helena didn't expect, a question that cut like a blade. "What is the real motivation behind this marriage?" Helena's body locked up. Miguel didn't blink. "The same motivation as any family that's trying to stay standing," he replied. "Protecting the people we love." The social worker let out a little hum and wrote again. And Helena realized that despite the mask, there was a crack there. Maybe that woman also had a human side, hidden behind all the protocol. Before leaving, the social worker stopped at the door and said, "I'll review the report, but I have to say that your presence changes the situation. And Julia seems emotionally well." She looked at Helena one last time, as if she wanted to say something beyond the official words. "Make sure this isn't just a performance. Because if it is, the fall will be worse." She left, and the door closed with a sound that seemed to echo in Helena's soul. Helena leaned her back against the wall and slid down until she was sitting on the floor. Miguel walked over slowly. "You did well," he said. Helena let out a laugh that turned into a sob. "I'm lying," she whispered. "I hate lying." Miguel crouched beside her. "You're not lying about loving your sister," he replied. "You're using a form the system understands to protect something real." Helena pressed her eyes shut, trying to stop crying. Julia stood there watching them both. And then, without warning, the teenager did something Helena hadn't seen her do since she was little. Julia ran over and hugged Helena tightly. "I don't want to leave," Julia whispered in her ear, and it felt like both a stab and an embrace. Helena held her sister with her whole body. "You're not going to," she promised. "I won't let you." Miguel watched in silence. Laura, not understanding everything, came closer and hugged them as well, as if she were trying to stitch people together with her arms. And in that tangle of bodies, tears, and breathing, Helena felt something strange, as if a family were being born right there, not because of a piece of paper, but out of necessity, care, and choice. But life doesn't let a miracle happen without charging a price. That afternoon, the manager called. Helena answered, her heart racing. "You're fired," he said bluntly. "And you can forget about your severance. I've got proof you stole food from the restaurant and made a customer pay for you. That's cause for dismissal." Helena couldn't breathe. "I didn't steal," she tried to say. "You did," he answered, laughing. "And if you insist, I'll go to the police. And I'll tell the social worker, too. You think I don't know about your little visit today? Small town, sweetheart." Helena felt her body go cold from head to toe. When she hung up, she stared at the wall. The room spun. Miguel noticed immediately. "What happened?" Helena told him, her voice breaking, each word feeling like it ripped away another piece of her dignity. Miguel was silent for a few seconds. Then, with a dangerous kind of calm, he said, "What's his name?" Helena looked at Miguel, startled. "No," she said quickly. "Don't get involved. Please. That could ruin everything." Miguel took a deep breath, like someone holding back their rage so it doesn't explode into a storm. "Helena," he said, "I've spent too long watching people abuse those who can't defend themselves. I'm not watching that again." Helena frowned. "What are you, Miguel? You talk like you know how to handle this." Miguel dropped his eyes for a moment. "I'm a lawyer," he admitted, "but not the fancy suit kind. I work family cases, custody, child protection. I live inside this system." Helena was speechless. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to think I was manipulating you," Miguel went on. "I came as a father, as a man, as someone who knows what pain is. But now I'm also going to act as a lawyer." Helena felt a mixture of relief and fear. "And if he tells the social worker that our marriage is a lie?" she whispered. Miguel looked straight at her, firm. "Then we stop lying," he said. Helena froze. "What do you mean?" Miguel inhaled deeply, and the next sentence came with enormous weight, as if he himself were hearing it for the first time. "I can marry you for real." The world went silent inside Helena's head. She blinked. She thought she had heard it wrong. "Miguel, you can't say that." "I can," he replied. "And I'm not saying it on impulse. I'm saying it because I see you. And because I know this wouldn't only solve tomorrow's visit. It would solve the rest." Helena shook her head desperately. "You don't even love me," she said, tears burning hot. "You're doing this out of guilt, gratitude, pity." Miguel took one step closer, not invading, but steady. "Pity doesn't get anyone through life together," he said. "And guilt doesn't support a child. I'm not asking you for love right now. I'm offering you partnership, a home, a path." Helena laughed painfully. "And what if I can't give you anything? I'm a broke waitress. I dropped out of college. I'm nobody." Miguel held her gaze with a calm steadiness. "Helena," he said, "you were somebody at that hospital. You were somebody to Julia. You were somebody to Laura, who drew a house for you. And you are becoming somebody to me, even though I'm trying to pretend this doesn't affect me." Helena felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "I don't want you to regret this," she whispered. Miguel nodded, and his eyes grew wet, but his voice stayed steady. "I've regretted worse things," he admitted. "I regret not holding my son's hand when he died, because I was in the hallway trying to be strong. I regret thinking I had to carry everything alone. I don't want to regret letting an injustice win when I could have done something." Helena breathed as if she were learning how to breathe again. "I need to think," she said. Miguel nodded. "Think," he replied. "But no one thing. No matter what you decide, I'm not going to let that manager destroy you. And I'm not going to let them take Julia away." That night, Helena stayed awake again. Not from fear of the social worker, but from fear of hope. Because hope is dangerous when you've already been broken so many times. She watched Julia sleeping on the thin mattress and thought of her father. Thought of the hospital. Thought of Laura drawing a house with a son. Thought of Miguel with that look of a man who had lost everything and still chose to be good. At the police station, Miguel spoke clearly and calmly, presenting what he had: proof of payment, testimony that he had paid of his own free will, and, above all, the simple logic that Helena hadn't stolen anything. She had been humiliated. The officer looked tired, but he listened. And when Miguel mentioned labor lawsuits, harassment, abuse of power, the man's expression changed. Because deep down, everyone knows there are people who feed on other people's fear. Then they went to the restaurant. It was full. Bright lights, glasses, laughter. Helena's stomach turned, but Miguel held her hand. Not like a soap opera boyfriend. Like someone reminding you that you're not alone. The manager saw them come in and forced a fake smile. "Well, look who's back," he said. Miguel didn't smile. "We need to talk," he said. The manager laughed. "I don't talk to thieves." Miguel took a step forward, and his voice dropped, sharp as a blade. "You're going to talk," he replied. "Or you can talk to a judge instead. I have records of what you did. I have witnesses. And I have a teenage girl who can testify about how you threatened to take food from her table just to humiliate her sister." The manager blinked, surprised. Miguel continued, still without raising his voice. "You're going to overturn the cause for dismissal. You're going to pay her what you owe. And you're going to apologize." The manager straightened up, trying to act tough. "And who are you?" "The husband," he mocked. Miguel looked at Helena for a second. In that look, there was a silent question. Now? Helena felt her chest tighten. She felt the fear. She felt the old shame. And then something inside her, maybe her father's memory, maybe Lara's drawing, maybe the exhaustion of being beaten down in silence. Something lifted its head. She stepped forward. "Yes," Helena said firmly. "He's my husband." The word hung in the air. But this time, it didn't feel like a lie. It felt like a shield. The manager opened his mouth to say something, but Miguel cut in. "And I'm a lawyer." The manager's smile died instantly. Several tables went quiet, because the energy in the room shifted. Abuse doesn't like the light. Abuse prefers dark hallways. Miguel finished. "You decide how this ends. With an apology here and now, or with a lawsuit that's going to make you swallow every humiliation you threw at her." The manager glanced around, realized he was being watched, and his cowardice showed in one small detail. He didn't stand his ground. He backed down. "Let's go to the office," he muttered. In the cramped back room, he signed a simple agreement. He paid part of what he owed right there. And without looking Helena in the eye, he forced out a dry sorry, like someone spitting something they didn't want to swallow. Helena walked out shaking. Not from fear, from relief. Outside, the rain had started again, light, almost gentle. Miguel walked toward the car, and Helena stopped on the sidewalk. "Miguel," she called. He turned. Helena took a deep breath. "I don't know how to love again," she confessed. "I don't know how to trust." Miguel stood still, waiting, unhurried. "But I know how to recognize when someone shows up as an answer." Helena went on, and now her tears were different. "And I know I don't want to lose this because of fear." Miguel took a step toward her. "Then don't lose it," he said. Helena was trembling. "Do you still want?" she began, her voice failing. Miguel nodded. "I want to build something," he replied. Slowly, the right way. Helena breathed as if she were opening a window inside her chest. "Then," she said, the words small and huge at the same time, "let's do this the right way." Miguel didn't react with movie-style fireworks. He simply rested his forehead against hers for a second, like someone saying thank you without words. And Helena felt a warmth that didn't come from the weather. It came from the fact that, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't fighting alone. Months later, Helena went back to school. Not perfectly, the way she could. Miguel adjusted his work schedule to pick up Julia from school. Lara gained an older sister without quite understanding how. And little by little, Julia stopped looking at the world as if it were always the enemy. And on a simple Sunday, in a small ceremony without luxury, Helena signed a piece of paper beside Miguel. But as she put the pen down, she realized that paper wasn't what was holding the family together. It was what the world needed to see in order to respect what was already real. On the way out, Lara ran toward her with the same drawing in her hands, now with an even bigger sun. Helena looked at Miguel and whispered, her voice unsteady. "I'm still afraid." Miguel squeezed her hand. "So am I," he answered. "But now we have each other. And maybe that's the hardest and most beautiful lesson life teaches. It's not about never falling. It's about finding someone who holds your hand when you can't get up on your own. It's about dignity. It's about justice. It's about a love that isn't born out of a fairy tale, but from the cold floor of reality, and even so, becomes a miracle. Do you believe in destiny, or in coincidences that are just miracles in disguise? If this story touched your heart, Write in the comments which moment gave you the biggest chills. Share it with someone who needs to remember that there is still kindness in the world. And subscribe to the channel.